I'm beginning to think. Yes, I'm beginning to think. Thoughts become me.
Welcome to The Cost of Not Paying Attention, hosted by nationally recognized speaker Janine Hamner Holman. Janine knows what it takes to attract and retain world-class talent. Join her here each week on The Cost of Not Paying Attention as we use brain science, leadership, management, and real-life challenges managers face to explore the places where we aren't paying attention.
Welcome to The Cost of Not Paying Attention. I'm your host, Janine Hamner Holman. What am I paying attention to today? Y'all, I had an opportunity yesterday to get together with a group of CEOs, and we were talking about how this little computer that lives in our head makes up stories, because that's how it sorts information and keeps things in line. But then the tricky part is when we make up a story and then we live into that story as though it is real. So one of the CEOs I was talking to said that several years ago, he had been at a networking event and he met this woman CEO, and he was sure that she hated him. And every time he would run into her at something, he would avoid her because he was sure that she hated him. And then about a year ago, she said, as a meeting was breaking up, "Hey, Frank, don't leave because I wanna talk to you at the end of this meeting." And he thought, "Oh, shit! I'm in trouble. There's a problem. This is going to be awful." And she stopped him and said, "So I have a client who I think you would be a perfect match for. And I want to put you guys together. And, the first meeting, maybe the three of us can do so I can smooth the road for you." And that organization became actually his biggest revenue client currently. And so he was talking about, like, he had created this whole scenario where this woman hated him. And then she introduced him to his biggest client. She did not hate him. And for 2 years, he lived as though that was true. And so I love this idea of how much this machine makes meaning in the world, and how tricky it can be to then get out of our way because we've made up all these stories. So with that, I am going to bring in our guest for today, who you're seeing here. Elise Stevens is a new best friend of mine. She is a career tactician, and what she does is she helps people thrive in the workplace. She's an amazing coach and strategist, and she is the person that you want to talk to about your career when you're tired of getting those same old results. And when she and I were talking last, we got into talking about this idea of how you read a room. And so I am super excited to get to have this conversation with you today. Welcome to the show, Elise.
Janine, hello. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. And as you may have noticed, Elise has a bit of a lilting accent. She is joining us from Brisbane, Australia, where it is now, 8 o'clock Saturday morning?
It is, but it's a lovely day here in Brisbane.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. So as I often start, Elise, tell me, what is something that you have become aware of that we're not paying enough attention to? And what is the cost to us of that inattention?
Well, I love the topic of your title of your podcast, The Cost of Not Paying Attention, because often people ignore what's going on regarding politics.
Yeah.
in organization, and being able to read the room. And I use the room as a much more generic thing than just, you're in a meeting and you're seeing things. So the cost of not paying attention to politics and what's going on is that it may negatively impact you,
Right.
right? And no one wants that. No one wants to be blindsided by something happening, either being moved out of a role you like, or, exiting the organization at its most extreme, increased stress, decreased mental health, all these things. And let's face it, people's behavior at work is often driven by ego and the pursuit of power.
Right.
I wish it wasn't so, but it is so true.
Right. So let's define what we're talking about first. And I found this article. Chaz, can you pull up the Better Up one? Great. So what this is talking about is how when we notice cues that are happening in our workplace, Chaz, thanks. It enables us to better sort of navigate. So when you're thinking about how to read a room, is that essentially what we're talking about?
Yeah, like we're talking about how to engage people, how to get people, how to be a better influencer, but also how to navigate the tricky world of organizational politics.
And so when we think about organizational politics, what are the things that we want to be paying attention to so that we are a better negotiator, so that we are more effective, so that we are, getting the buy-in from the people that we need to get the buy-in from?
Well, with anything, you've got to understand who's who in the zoo, who the gatekeepers are, who's got the power. And so if you're trying to bring in a piece of change, which is what I do as an organizational change manager, you've really got to understand who are the people that are going to derail this? Who are the people that are going to be sending you the stroppy email and saying, I'm not happy, this has got to stop? And then it's like,
and so what are the ways that we can, because this could be a tricky skill for people. So what are the ways that we can improve our attunement to that? I mean, sometimes it's just, who's the CEO or who's the highest ranking in the room. But sometimes there's other kinds of influencers and politics that can be going on. So how can we get better at being attuned to that?
So if you're new to an organization, I think the first thing you need to do is pull out the org chart.
Yeah.
And look and see. But you also need to listen.
Yeah.
Listen to what people are saying. Listen to people that have worked there for a while about, you've got to watch out for X, Y, Z. They're not happy. And just keep an open mind, because, when you listen to other people, you're also bringing their baggage along with you.
Right.
So, but you've got to form your own opinion, but you've got to be agile in that approach so that you can adapt, because people aren't just, linear.
Yeah.
Things go up and down all the time.
Right.
But I also think that you need to actually look at some of the internal social media channels like Yammer and Facebook for Business, and see who's active and what they're saying. There are some groups within organizations that might be small but have a lot of power.
Right.
It's not necessarily the large groups. And so you've got to map out kind of who's got the ear of the CEO, who's their pet, where has the CEO come from? Have they come from internal? What was their old group? You've really got to do a lot of market research, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I want to go back for just a second to what you said right at the beginning of that. Chaz, can you bring up HBR1? So, what I love about this, often when we think about influencing, we're really thinking about what can
Yeah.
I say? What can I do? How can I mold the conversation? But this article here from the Harvard Business Review is really talking about the way that we pay attention when we are not speaking, and the way that we want to influence other people, and the nonverbal cues that we want to be watching out for. Thanks, Chaz. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, NLP,
Yeah.
right? So if I talk to someone and I'm not using the same terms as them, they're immediately going to go, what? But if I reframe the conversation, if I listen in the first place and work out listen to what they're saying and the words they use, and then I come back and use those same words, then they're going to be a lot more, oh, she understands what I'm about, and
Yeah.
she's listening to what I'm saying. And so I'll give you an example. So a particular person has a thing against the word test.
Okay.
Right? So if I was to go and say to them, I need someone to help with testing doing this,
Mm-hmm.
what's their immediate response going to be?
They're going to shut down because you're using using this word that I don't like. I don't like
Yeah.
it. I don't like tests.
Yeah. So instead, I go back and I use the word review, verify, all of
Analysis.
these. Yeah. Right. But they're a lot happier because, oh, she's only asking me to review something. She's not asking me to test something, even though it's the same thing.
Right. Right. And I love what you were pointing to a minute ago when you were talking about when we use the same language as somebody else. It's how, when we are in affinity with somebody, we often end up mirroring their body language. People say to me all the time, people who know my mother really well, they say, "Oh my gosh, you look so much like your mom." I look nothing like my mother. I look a lot like my dad. I look nothing like my mother. What they are noticing is our facial expressions and our hand mannerisms. And my mother and I are very close. And so, I do a lot of things that are like my mother. And so people make that connection. And when we can do that mirroring, it creates that feeling of connectivity and affinity that, we all know people do business with people that they like. And so when we can create that connection with them, we can move things further along.
Yeah, and you've also got to listen to clues, either, via email or, in meetings, about how engaged they are with you. Because, a lot of organizations, especially here in Australia, they're not so much on the direct. And like, I interviewed a Dutch girl once, and she said that, Australians, you're so different to the Dutch, because she is saying that the Dutch just come out and say it, whereas the Australians, they kind of
Beat around the bush.
around,
Right.
and often it's not a direct strike, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
More likely to escalate and have it come down that way than to actually just speak to you and say there's a problem. Well, it's an organizational thing too. I'll just preface that.
Right.
But being able to pick up the clues when people are cranky and might be starting to escalate is so important. And sometimes you can't work it out.
Right.
It just comes out of the blue and you're like, oh, what have I done?
So as I was doing research and prepping for this conversation, I came across this really interesting article. Chaz, can you put up Chad? So what this is from a website that's all about helping parents whose kids have ADHD and or are on the spectrum. And part of what they were talking about is, of course, that a child with ADHD and a child who's on the spectrum has a hard time cueing into body language and tone of voice and facial expressions and social cues. And thanks, Chaz. And so I had never really thought about this concept of reading a room from that perspective. And, you know, in today's world, of course, so many of us we are realizing are either on the spectrum, or my stepson has ADHD. You know, it's these things are more and more common. And so it got me thinking, and you may not have an answer to this, but I just thought we could explore it a little bit. What do I do if I know I am not somebody who is naturally good at being able to read a room? Like, if I have a close friend at work, can I enroll them in trying to help me figure things out? Or like, what ideas do you have about, you know, if sort of I suck at this, how can I get better? And B, what might be some workaround strategies to try to read the room if I'm not good at picking that stuff up?
Oh, great question, Janine. Well, often after a meeting, you'll debrief with the other people, especially if it's been quite tumultuous. I think I pronounced that right.
Right, yes. The meeting after the meeting.
Yeah. And often, especially after they've been quite horrible, let's call it, you know, it's been quite emotional, and, you know, there's been a bit of argy-bargy and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Then you'll debrief with the other, with your posse, with your friends, and I think that if you have trouble reading the room, that's a great way to do it. And just, you know, just with one person, go, I thought this, what do you think? Or I was having trouble working out what was going on in there. Were people happy, not happy, all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's a great way to do it. And that's why it's really important to have good interpersonal relationships with people that you trust.
Yeah.
I also think, I was saying before that, you know, sometimes people aren't direct, but I do find that people give you verbal and visual clues about what they're thinking. And so often words and actions don't match, and that's a red flag. So, and so that is, you know, people, so I'll give you an example. I used to work with someone that was a dreadful project manager, and she used to say, I'm very self-aware.
I love it when people say that, because usually the people who say that are the least self-aware people. It's so interesting.
Yeah, right. So you're immediately thinking you're not self-aware at all. And I think that, you know, I think that the more outrageous the claim, the more you should just take the opposite. So that's one example that was pretty funny. And I was in a meeting, and some people were disagreeing with each other, and I don't know, for whatever reason, they were saying, sorry, Janine. And then you would go, sorry, Elise.
Right.
And so myself and the other people were chatting, because it's all Zoom calls. It's very not in person at all. And so what we were saying was sorry equals not sorry at all.
Correct.
And I think that that's important to read the room.
Yeah.
You know, they both wanted their way. No one was going to back down. And, you know, it was like, and then they said, well, we'll have to take this offline.
Yeah.
And it's like, good. Sick of hearing this sorry.
And, you know, so you and I both get to work with organizations and help them through some of these snarly issues. Yeah. And so when you're in a situation, if you're like facilitating a conversation, or you're the consultant who's been brought in to help with this, and people are being sorry, not sorry, and people are being snarky and, starting to cross that line, what do you, when you're sort of reading the room and figuring out, all right, so is it better to just stay here and hash it out? Or is it better to actually say, I don't really think we're going to make much progress on this right now. Let's take a break, and then let's come back to this when we next get together, next Tuesday, or whenever that opportunity is. How do you try to help organizations and people navigate through that?
Look, I think you have to call time on it. Just go,
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yep.
You don't say it like that, obviously. Just give me a shot.
You have been naughty. You go to the corner. Time out.
Yeah. So what
I'd
you
like
do
to say
is
that
you
sometimes.
just yeah, you do. But the thing is that you get sick of hearing the sorry, not sorry for the 10th time. And it's just like, look, I got other things to do rather than listen to this shit.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, most definitely.
So I found this really interesting article in Business Insider, and it was talking, Chaz, can you pull up BI1? It was talking a little bit about how we are often a mover or an opposer, a follower or a bystander, and how we act out of power or meaning or affect. And we can be closed or open or random. Thanks, Chaz. And I found those concepts really interesting about sort of the power dynamics that might be happening inside of a conversation that might not necessarily have anything to do with the actual power that people have, but sort of the roles that we play. And I was thinking about, as we are trying to read the room and trying to gauge what's happening and how to move forward, how to get the buy-in that we need, to get the outcome that we need, to get the result that we need, to make the thing that we're trying to have happen in the organization. What are your thoughts around sort of the different hats that we put on, and whether we decide to be the power mover or the follower, or sort of, these different roles that we can put on in these kinds of conversations, and then how do people read that?
So sorry, there's an audio issue. I'm hearing some very strange sounds from your mic. Can we do a sound? Are you hearing that too, Elise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Not sure what's going on.
Thanks for that, Chaz.
Yeah, no problem. I want to make sure that we don't continue that way. Go ahead and disconnect your microphone.
So I flipped to a different microphone. How's that?
It sounds better. Yeah.
Okay.
Give me a quick sound check.
Check 1 2 1 2.
Yeah,
Chaz Volk is awesome.
Thank you. All right, cool. So I'm gonna remove myself now from the interview, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I hope you remember the last thought you had. Just continue off where you left off. Thank you, Janine.
Thanks, Chaz. So did you get what I was pick up what I was putting down?
I think that you have to quickly work out kind of the style of the person. And I mean that, command and control.
Yep.
Are they truly, a facilitator? There's different ways to categorize them.
Yep.
How much of a narcissist are they? What's their buttons?
Yeah.
That you don't ever want to push.
Right.
What's the words you can and can't use with them?
Yeah.
And it's a bit trial by fire.
Right, because if we get it wrong,
they're gonna black ban you, baby.
Right.
Trust you. So I think that, I always I always have problems with command and control.
I think most of us do. I mean, it's one of the things that's great about getting to do what you and I get to do at this moment in time, because many organizations are realizing that this old command and control structure, it actually doesn't work great for modern humans. And so we get to help them figure out how to move into something different.
Actually,
Sometimes.
I'm not seeing any movement.
Really?
Really.
Oh, man.
I don't know whether it's just the organizations I work with,
Uh-huh.
but I there's this disconnect between, you know, the lofty HR ideals of,
Right.
you know, kumbaya and, you know, we must all be better leaders. And then I find that from an operational perspective, we'll let people do whatever they need to do. And even though there might be some people damage,
Yeah.
we're not going to address it until it suits us. And you never, like, you kind of already know how bad. I always find that people's bad behavior is tolerated until it isn't.
Yeah. And so when you are working with organizations, what do you find is often that tipping point that gets organizations or organizational leaders to say, okay, this that we used to say, you know, we didn't publicly say it was okay, but we tacitly said it was okay by not doing anything about it. What tends to be that tipping point?
I think once things are escalated to a really senior manager,
Mm-hmm.
like if it's just confined to like
One team or
one team, one division,
Yep.
one department,
Yep.
then yeah, they're delivering, you know.
Right.
I don't have to do anything.
Yep.
But once it goes kind of out and up and comes
Mm-hmm.
back down, then they've got to do something. So it's not until someone else rocks the boat,
Yeah,
that they'll do something. Has been my observation.
so I'm really curious. I mean, obviously, I'm in the US, you're in Australia.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what do
Mhm.
you see as, you know, there's some organizations here, one that I've just started working with, and they have been having really significant turnover year over
Mhm.
year, like 40%, 50% of their staff. Right. I mean, huge numbers. And it was when the CEO finally realized, I mean, he knew people were quitting, but it was when he realized really what the cost was of that transition in hard dollars, that and intellectual capital walking out the door, that he suddenly was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we better do something about this. So what
Mhm.
are the other triggers that you see as sort of motivating people to realize, all right, we do need to do something about this?
You know, that's
It's a
a
hard
good.
question.
It is a hard question because I've seen so much inactivity with this. I've seen some exit interviews from people leaving the organization and putting and writing down what has really
What
gone
really
on.
went on? Yeah.
That HR have kind of done something, but not.
Yep.
But I just don't see it. I think that, you know, bad behavior unfortunately is tolerated until it's not, under the guise of people deliver.
Yep.
I think it's a shame, but you know, at the end of the day, I think that that people just think that, oh well, we're expendable. The cost on individuals doesn't, for some people, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone, but some.
Yeah. No, certainly, yes. And I wonder if the group of people that are realizing that the cost to individuals and that the cost to an organization for losing high performers, I wonder if that group of people who get it is growing. It feels to me like it is. When I talk with folks at different levels in organizations, it feels to me like there's more of a general understanding of that than there has been in the past.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a big part of what you and I are both up to in the world, is working on creating that understanding that organizations do well when their people do well.
Yeah, but I think that people also have to take more ownership of their own happiness at work.
Yeah. Happiness is one of these ideas that my personal opinion about happiness is that we've gotten this idea wrong. That in the United States Bill of Rights, the pursuit of happiness is part of what we're supposedly up to as a group. And happiness is it's circumstantial. Right now, as we are having this conversation, I am actually heartbroken. We had to say goodbye to our beloved dog earlier this week.
Oh, no.
I know. I mean, it's one of the things that is just awful about having these furry creatures in our lives. And if I talk about it for too long, I will well up. So I'm not going to do that. So I am not happy. I'm not happy at all. I am, however, motivated. I am, however, curious. I am, however, ultimately satisfied with my life. And so I think we've collapsed some things when we think inside of an organization that an organization is responsible for my happiness. I think an organization is responsible for my satisfaction, which is a very different thing, because it's less based on in the moment circumstances, as I think about it. What do you have to say to all that?
Look, well, I'm sorry to hear about your dog.
Thank you.
That I've lost pets before, and it takes a lot to transition through that grief.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a final state of happiness. I think that there's a number of factors. Being at peace. I'm trying to actually more talk about how there are some things that we can change at work to make us a lot more, if I don't use the word happy, I don't know what I'll use, but
content, powerful.
Yeah, content.
Yeah.
And it's not about promotions and things like that. It's about doing meaningful work.
Absolutely.
It's about being respected and giving respect to others around us. It's about having that sense of fulfillment and contributing to something that you enjoy. Right. It's an intellectual thing for some people.
Yep.
There's so many different factors, but I think that, I see so many people that are grumpy at work, and it's like, and they do push all that responsibility back onto the organization, and it's like, no, actually that is you to resolve and to get in the moment, because if work's not working for you,
no, I get what you mean. If work's not working for you,
if it's not doing it for you, then you need to do something about it, because there are very few of us that are financially stable enough to just say
out.
Yeah.
Right.
Chop it out. But I do think that if something's not working for you, then you need to do something about it. And the one that was said that she's self-aware, she was really toxic. Oh, just, and it and yet they chose to do nothing about it. Eventually they did,
Right.
because a higher up person complained and she couldn't understand it.
Right.
Just like,
No, I once had a boss scream at me, you know nothing about people. I was like, dude, if I know one thing, what I know about is people.
yeah.
And, he, in fact, massively not self-aware and incredibly toxic. And eventually something was done about him. And I made a conscious choice. I am not invested enough in this organization to try and do anything about that. What I'm going to do is find a new job, which I did, and I left. And so if you find yourself in that kind of situation out there, Elise is one of the people that I know who's an amazing coach and who can help people not only think about how to be happier in their career, but also sometimes think about making a change. Yeah.
Well, that's the big thing, isn't it? Right. The thing is that when you're unhappy at work, what are you going to do? You're going to go home and take it out on your family. Right? You're going to have a shit life. Your health's going to be impacted. Your stress levels are going to go up. You're not going to enjoy life, all because some person at work's making your life difficult.
Right.
And so it's like, well, I'm thinking that, you've got a choice to be unhappy, happier, content. It's your choice.
Or
you have to do something.
Or make a different choice and get the heck out.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Well, Elise, this has been wonderful. And I am really trying to get our shows closer to 30 minutes and leave the hour-long shows behind. So
Yes.
we are now a little more than 30 minutes. So I'm going to start wrapping it up. If there was something that you wanted to talk about today or to share with our listeners that you haven't had an opportunity to do yet, is there anything?
No, I just want to go back and say, listen more.
Yeah.
Because people often tell you what they're thinking. And the more random it seems, the more you got to listen. If that makes sense. So if someone says something to you out of context and you can't make sense of it,
right,
store it up, because it's going to make sense. And they're giving you a heads up about what they're planning to do and how it might impact you. I know that sounds cryptic, but I've had some people say some really odd things to me, and then months later, it's like the jigsaw formed and all the dots and the lines came together. So that's what you were telling me. And then I thought some really bad words after that.
Yeah, I have a mentor, Allison Armstrong, who often says, people will tell you who they are. You need to believe them. And I mean, we want people to be different. And so we create this different story about who they are. And then we live into that story as though it's real. And when information comes in that it doesn't fit that story, we let that information go. And her point is, no, like people will tell you who they are. And what we get to do is we get to listen and pay attention and notice what they're really saying and what they're really revealing, and then live into that. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much again for being up with us early on a Saturday morning, your time. Elise Stevens, you are a treasure, and I so appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janine. I always enjoy talking with you.
Wonderful.
On behalf of Janine Hamner Holman, thanks for paying attention. This has been the cost of not paying attention. Head on over to our website, www.janinehamner.com/podcast, for access to the show notes as well as additional resources. Remember, great leaders make great teams.